This is Warrior Kid podcast number 4, Ask Uncle Jake. And this podcast is based on the Way of the Warrior Kid books, of which there are 2. The first one, From Wimpy to Warrior, the Navy SEAL Way. And the second one is called Mark's Mission. And the books are about young Mark, who faces the kind of problems that kids everywhere face, and who gets help solving those problems from his Uncle Jake, who is a Navy SEAL and who stays with Mark in the summertime. And so I made this podcast for kids that want to learn some more lessons from Uncle Jake and also get a chance to ask Uncle Jake some questions. So here's some of the questions for Uncle Jake. Number 1, my son Blake would like to ask, why did you join the military? Well, I always wanted to be a soldier. Ever since I was a little kid, I got camouflaged clothing when I was 6 or 7 years old, and that's what I liked to wear. And I always liked being outside. I grew up in the woods, and my friends and I, we played a lot of war and ran around in the woods. And I liked books, and I liked movies about war, and I liked learning about war in history classes. Also, one of my grandfathers was in the Army for 20 years, and I thought that that was very cool. Another thing is that I wanted to serve my country because the freedom in the United States of America is an amazing thing. And there are some countries in the world where there isn't freedom. And it's a little bit hard to understand what that means. But what that means is that there's people in other countries in the world that can't travel where they want to travel. And they can't work the job that they want to work. And they can't even eat the foods that they want to eat. And they can't even read the books that they want to read. They're not free in those countries. But in America, we have the freedom to do all those things. And those freedoms that we have need to be protected. And that's what the military does. So I figured I wanted to help out. And that is why I joined the military. All right. The next question is from Grace, who's only 5 years old, but she's a warrior kid. And she's from Northern Ireland. And she asked me 2 questions. Who is your favorite president? And what is your favorite food? Okay, so the first one, well, who's my favorite president? We've had a lot of great presidents, but I would have to say that my favorite president is probably George Washington. And I think a lot of people would say George Washington would be their favorite president. He's a lot of times considered the father of our country. And I like him because he was a very hard worker. He was a great leader. And he was a military guy, which I was a military guy too, so I like that. And when he was younger, he fought for the British against the French and Indian Wars. He fought, and that was when he was in his 20s. And then America rebelled against England, and he fought for our new country. But what a lot of people don't know about George Washington is that in the Revolutionary War, when America was fighting against England, he actually lost more battles than he won. He lost more battles than he won. But what I admire about him is that he always kept fighting and he never gave up. Now, it's important to understand that that doesn't mean that he never backed off or he never retreated. He knew that sometimes he wasn't going to win a battle. So he would retreat, and that means you escape or you get away. He would do that so his troops could recover and restore themselves and live to fight another day. So even though he had to run away sometimes, but he always came back. And in the end, he won and we won. And I think that's one of the best qualities for a leader to have and for any person to have, is to never give up. At the same time, you got to know sometimes you might have to retreat for a little while so you can rebuild. but then you come back and win. You never give up. The other thing I like about George Washington is that he was a humble leader. And after the Revolutionary War was over, he had a chance to be in total control of America, like a king. But instead of doing that, he said no. He wanted America to be a democracy where everyone would have a say. So those are some of the reasons why I think George Washington is my favorite president. Now, the other question, what's my favorite food? That's a much easier question for me to answer. My favorite food is steak. And there's a cut of steak called a ribeye. And I like it cooked medium with a little bit of salt and pepper. But what's interesting is that I didn't really even like steak until I was about 20 years old. Because when I was a kid, steak is very expensive. And when I was a kid, we didn't get a lot of steak in my house. We'd only get hamburgers. And so I didn't really like the taste of steak until I joined the Navy and I started making a little bit of money and I could afford to go out and buy some steaks. But that's my favorite food now. But when I was a kid, it was probably hamburgers. Next question. Uncle Jake, if I argue with my parents, how do I make up? Well, the best thing to do if you argue with your parents and you want to make up, which you should, and this isn't just about your parents, really anyone that you argue with, the best thing that you can do is tell them you're sorry. And it seems like a really obvious answer, but it's not always that easy. Because when we get in the argument in the first place, the reason we're arguing is because we think we are right and they are wrong. And so we don't want to say sorry. But you got to remember that when you argue with someone and you lose your temper, we know that we shouldn't act that way. So when you apologize, you're apologizing for the way that you acted. The problem with arguing is that you never actually find out who is right and who is wrong because you're too busy arguing. You're getting mad at the other person instead of listening to what they say. That's why warrior kids have to control their tempers. So you can have a discussion and learn about other people's perspectives and other people's beliefs so you can figure out what is really right or wrong by listening. And that is what is going to make you smarter. So back to the question. When you want to make up with someone, the best thing you can do is say you're sorry. And also you have to mean it. You can't just say the words. You have to believe it and you have to mean it. That's what being sorry is. All right, next question. This is a little bit of a heavier question. What does it mean to be a professional? How can you develop the switch between professionalism and laughing and having fun? Okay, so being professional means doing a good job, doing the best job that you can do. In the SEAL teams, we actually used that term a lot. When someone was really good at their job, we'd call them a professional. So what is a professional? A professional is someone that is always on time, always has the right gear, always pays attention to what is going on, always makes good decisions, and always takes their job very seriously. That's what being professional is. Now, it's important to remember that this doesn't mean that SEALs who were professional couldn't laugh and have fun. I was very professional, but I'll tell you, I still had a ton of fun in the SEAL teams. But the question is a good question because you do have to know when to flip the switch between being serious and being professional and when you're going to have fun. And in the SEAL teams, and I think it represents really everything in life, when we were just sitting around or we were going to eat or we were doing something that wasn't really important or wasn't work related, we would have all kinds of fun. And we would play pranks on each other and laugh hysterically and just have a good time. But once we had work to do, we got serious and we did it like professionals. And here's the biggest lesson about this. If there is some time when you aren't sure if you should be serious and professional or if you should laugh or joke around and have fun, what you do, and if you're not sure, is you stay serious and you stay professional. Then, as time goes by and you understand the situation better, if it's appropriate, you can start to loosen up and you can start to have some fun. But if you're joking around when you should have been serious, you can't take that back. So it's always better to start off as serious and professional and then have fun later if it's appropriate. All right, next question says, what should I do when I feel sorry for myself? Usually when I'm dealing with my type 1 diabetes. Okay, so for those that don't know what type 1 diabetes is, it's a disease that some people are born with. And it makes it hard for their body to take sugar from the blood and use it in the body. And the way the body does that is using something called insulin. And someone that has diabetes has trouble making insulin, so they have to be very, very careful about eating too much sugar. They have to check their blood regularly. They have to poke their finger to get blood out. And sometimes they have to get shots of insulin into their body. And so it is not fun. And there's actually lots of other diseases that people get because the body's like a machine, like a car. And sometimes cars don't work right. Sometimes machines don't work right. And there's all kinds of problems that you can have with the body. There's heart diseases and lung diseases and brain diseases and bone diseases, all kinds of diseases. But the thing is, even though type 1 diabetes hurts and it's hard to deal with, the good thing is at least it can be dealt with. There are some diseases that are even worse. So try and look at the positive side. And that is true regardless of what sickness or disease that you might have. What you got to do, and I know it's hard, but you got to try and focus on doing what you can. What can you do? If you can't run, maybe you can do pull-ups. If you can't do pull-ups, maybe you can play guitar. If you can't play guitar, maybe you can draw. If you can't draw, maybe you can sing. If you can't sing, maybe you can learn to program a computer. If you can't learn to program a computer, maybe you can read books and write reports about the books. So you always have to look and see what you can do. I've been injured a few times. I've had some surgeries that put me down for a while, and I was kind of upset because I couldn't do the things that I love to do, but I didn't focus on that. I tried to focus on what things I could do. Another thing is, don't compare yourself with other people. Everyone is different. You have to try and compare yourself with yourself. Try and compete, not with everyone else, but compete with yourself. And try and get yourself to be better every single day. And I think that's the moral of this story, is do what you can. Work with what you have. Don't think about what you can't do. Think about what you can do and then go out and do it. The next one says, Uncle Jake. Sometimes at school, I get bored, especially with math and science and reading when it's too easy. My teacher gets upset and says I still need to put my best effort into it, but it's hard to do that when I already know it. What should I do? Okay, so your teacher is actually right. You should do your best all the time. And then once you do your best, you should do even a little bit more. And when you say you already know it, well, guess what? You don't know everything. You should try and learn even more. So like in science, if you know that the sun is made of mostly gas, that's great. But maybe you should learn what kind of gas. Maybe you should learn that it's made of hydrogen and helium and carbon and nitrogen and oxygen. Did you know that much? Maybe you already know what the word etymology means. Maybe you already know that it means the study of words and the way their meanings change over time. But if you already know that, well, then you can learn the etymology of the word etymology. Etymology means where do words come from? And that word comes from a Greek word, etymologia, which means the study of the true sense of something. So those are the kind of things you can learn if you already know what they're teaching in class. Because you don't know everything, and none of us ever will. So you can see what else you can learn. Now, here's another thing that you can do when you are very comfortable with what's being taught in class is you can try and help some kids that maybe don't understand. Don't be mean about it. Don't talk down to them. Be nice and just try to explain to them in a language that they can understand and help them. Uncle Jake actually talks about that in the new Warrior Kid book. So I'm going to go to that real quick because I think Uncle Jake explains it pretty well what we're talking about here when we start getting a little bit bored. So what happens is Mark decides to tell Uncle Jake that he's bored. And here's the conversation that takes place. Mark says, "I'm bored, Uncle Jake." "Bored? How can you be bored? You're busy all day." That's the tricky thing. I know I'm busy all day with working out and mowing lawns and fixing my bike and going to summer camp and doing jiu-jitsu, but even all that stuff going on, I still feel kind of bored. And I feel like I've done what I wanted to do, so other than focusing on my jiu-jitsu tournament, I just feel like, I don't know, bored. Uncle Jake looked at me for a few seconds and then said, "Good." That is what he always seemed to say when something was wrong. "Good," I asked. "How is that good?" "Well, first of all, being bored means you're comfortable with what you have going on in your life. It is good for a few reasons. Number one, it means you've accomplished your goals. That means you've achieved what you wanted to achieve. You have a bike, you've made some money, you're making steady gains in your workouts and getting stronger. So that means you can set some new goals like you have for jiu-jitsu. Now that you have a tournament coming up, you can focus on that. It makes it exciting. And you can do that for the rest of the things you're doing. Find new goals. But the most important thing about being bored is it means that you have capacity. And by that I mean the time, the money, the knowledge, and the willingness to help other people, to help someone else. That is what a warrior should always strive to do. What is number 5 of your Warrior Kid code? Number 5 is the Warrior Kid treats people with respect and helps out other people whenever possible. That is right, Uncle Jake said. That's perfect. Warriors help other people whenever possible. Well, before, when you were struggling yourself, it wasn't possible for you to help other people. You had to help yourself first. How could you teach things you didn't know? How could you share money you didn't have? How could you train someone else when you needed to be trained yourself? But all those things have changed now. You are a totally different person. Before, maybe you could help your mom clean the kitchen or help your dad clean the car. And even those things are nice to do. But now you can really help other people. You can have a legitimate impact on their lives. That sounds cool, Uncle Jake. But I'm not sure I get it. How can I help other people in a big way? There are all kinds of ways to help other people. So, it sounds to me like this question, that is, this person that's asking this question is in a very similar situation. They are a little bit bored with school, but like Uncle Jake says, that now gives you the opportunity to help some other kids learn. And I think that is all the time we have for this Warrior Kid podcast. If you want to get one of the Warrior Kid books, you can get them at warriorkid.com. And if you want a Warrior Kid t-shirt or a jiu-jitsu rash guard, you can get them from a place called jockostore.com. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Thanks for reading the books. Now go out there, train hard, study hard, work hard, get after it, and be a Warrior Kid.